All right, if you just joined us, it's still Journalist Hangout. I still have BKO right here with us and Majid Jami. So straight to our next conversation. In every system, stability is often taken for granted until inconsistency begins to shape daily life. That truth is now playing out in Nigeria's power sector, where a significant reduction in electricity supply has sparked concerns across the country. This has prompted the Minister of Power, Adebayo Adelabu, to apologize to Nigerians, acknowledging the strain the drop in supply has placed on homes, businesses and essential services. The minister assured citizens that targeted interventions are underway with a promise of noticeable improvement within 14 days. All right, let's share an update on the story.
It's the first quarter power sector stakeholders meeting, and top on the agenda is the prevailing drop in electricity supply nationwide, particularly at a time of intense heat waves. Major stakeholders in the sector talk about the challenges and what they believe is the way out, including payment of an outstanding 4 trillion naira debt owed generating companies in subsidy.
They're paying 80 cents from 2016 January till date, and now it is moving to $1.15 or 13. I want to ask, those projects they submitted to NEC, has anybody monitored to know that those projects have been completed in terms of infrastructural development?
And what NAPTIN has done carefully is to look beyond just the installer training, to create a training, because after you achieve the 4,000 installer training, what happens to them when all the meters are installed?
At the end of the meeting, the minister announced the formation of a committee to fast-track improvement in electricity supply value chain. And as he addressed newsmen after the meeting, the minister acknowledged the progress recorded in the last 2 years and also spoke to the worsening electricity situation in the country. As he apologized to Nigerians, he attributes the power crisis to shortage of gas supply and the Middle East crisis. Nevertheless, he assures Nigerians of improvements in the next 2 weeks.
For the sake of our renewable energy, for solar and wind, there must be a clearly formalized coordination among these 4 ministries. So we want to apologize to the generality of Nigerians, officially now coming from me as the Minister of Power.
He also responds to inquiries relating to his ambition to govern Oyo State.
Except that we cannot help it. That's why we find ourselves here. But I can assure you that in the next few weeks, all this will be over. Power generation will improve, transmission will improve, distribution will improve, and that 6,000 megawatts will be achieved before the end of this year.
The government says the target of 15,000 megawatts of electricity is still very much alive and that it will continue to work round the clock to improve supply. Jokeyetsa, TVC News, Abuja.
All right, then joining the conversation from our Abuja studio to shed more light on the technical details being deployed to stabilize supply and rebuild confidence in the grid is the Chief Technical Advisor to the Minister of Power, Adebayo Olowoniyi. Thank you so much for joining us on Journalist Hangout.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So what would you say is the motive, behind the apology over outages by the Minister of Power?
No, I think from my perspective, it's just about good leadership, right? In terms of taking responsibility for the entire sector, even if it's not entirely his fault, but, he's the Minister of Power, and it was important for somebody to take responsibility for some of the challenges and prefer solutions to how we get out of this situation.
So the minister has told us that in a few weeks this problem will be over. We want to know from you what steps are going to be taken, because Nigerians are complaining. People on band A, they are not getting regular electricity supply, yet they are made to pay at the same tariff. The same tariff that was there when electricity was fairly regular. So what steps are we going to see? Okay. And what firm guarantees do we have that this situation will improve?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I think maybe I should contextualize the situation we're going through. So 75% of power generation in Nigeria is by thermal plants that use gas. In the last 2 to 3 weeks, one of the major transportation lines, is undergoing maintenance. And that's actually the reason why about 40% of gas transportation has reduced currently in the country, which means that most of the power generation from thermal is actually quite down at the moment. So we expect that that pipeline to be fixed within the next 2 weeks based on feedback from the Ministry of Petroleum Gas. And they are also monitoring it to make sure that this pipeline is fixed. Once that pipeline is fixed, I believe more gas will start to be put into the pipeline and will be able to feed, the power plants. Some of the other challenges that are affecting power generation from a gas perspective is, for the generation companies to be in a financial position to pay for the gas consumed. And that's also something that the federal government of Nigeria is supporting on by ensuring that the legacy debts that Mr. President approved are being paid. I believe the first tranche of the bond has been raised, which is about 501 billion. And that is going to be distributed, I believe, in the next week to the generation companies that have signed up and that their reconciliations have been completed. And then the next tranche of that payment, which will be a 720 billion naira bond, will be initiated in April. So one thing I can assure Nigerians is that the federal government is taking responsibility for historical legacy debts that wasn't necessarily created by this administration. But a power sector with significant legacy debts cannot be functional and cannot be sustainable. So that's why federal government is taking a multi-pronged approach to make sure that sustainability is at the heart of the power sector going forward.
Yes.
We expect that the Ministry of Power and its counterpart in the Ministry of Petroleum Resources ought to have informed Nigerians that the rehabilitation of the pipeline, of the gas pipeline by Seplat ought to have been communicated to Nigerians, so that we expect that this is coming, so that we have a timeline that this will be concluded. And like Gide said, now we still have about 14 days more for this rehabilitation to be concluded by Seplat. Those people who are in Band A, how are you going to compensate them? And what assurance do we have that after the next 14 days, we'll have improved power supply beyond the apology?
No, of course. Look, in terms of Band A supply, one thing that NERC, the regulator, had initiated is that, after a period of time and you're not getting a Band A supply, your feeder gets relegated to Band B, which means that you'll be going back to the previous tariff, not the highest tariff, because Band A is a service-based tariff. It means that you have to consistently get the service to be charged Band A, and all of that is done on the back end. So for a lot of customers that are not receiving the service, their feeder will definitely be downgraded to a Band B feeder until that feeder starts to be able to meet the requirements of a Band A feeder, and then on the back end, your tariff will then be adjusted back upwards. And in terms of communicating to Nigerians, I have to say that the independent system operator, that is an agency under the Ministry of Power, has communicated this multiple times in the last 2-3 weeks, where they indicated that the significant power shortfall was caused by a lack of gas. Sometimes what I see as a challenge in the sector is that even when government gives this type of feedback, we don't see the reciprocity from the private sector. So I would have expected the generation companies as well to come out to indicate that, yes, the reasons why they're not able to generate significant amount of electricity is also because they are not getting gas. And I would have expected distribution companies to also indicate that, the allocations that they are getting from the independent system operator has been reduced significantly because of the lack of electricity from generation companies due to lack of gas. But after the minister had his press conference yesterday, then I now start to see a plethora of information coming out from distribution companies who we believe that should have released this information at least 2-3 weeks ago, just indicating that this shortage is due to a lack of gas supply and is impacting generation. And unfortunately, like I said earlier, Nigeria's generation is 75% thermal. So when there is a gas supply issue, it affects 75% of our generation. And that's why we're actually in the situation that we are today.
Okay, thank you, Chief Technical Advisor. Now we are being practical here. I'm a Band-A customer,
Yes.
and like so many others.
Yes.
For more than 30 days now, I've been paying for Band-A, which I'm not getting. You said we ought to have been downgraded, but we are yet to be downgraded. I still recharged this morning. It's still the same rate, and we still have 14 days more to go. So when are we going to be refunded for the 30 days that we have for services not provided? Because for internet providers, when you have an outage, you don't have internet provider, they will put you on pause. So if you have 3 days or 5 days, they will add the 5 days to your internet service. So now, when are we going to be downgraded? We are yet to be downgraded as at this morning. We are still on, 223? And the ones they have been paying for less than 12 hours in the last 1 month, when are we going to be refunded? We want answer to that, sir.
So again, like I indicated, the electricity regulator has a process where the service is not met, that feeder will be downgraded. So I can assure you that if you're in a Band-A feeder and the service level agreement has not been met, you will be downgraded. And as I indicated, that is on the back. So for example, you have vended, right? Let's assume you have bought a number of units, but there's no electricity. So anyways, you are not consuming it. So on the back end, your feeder will be downgraded to a Band-B feeder until your feeder meets the requirements of a Band-A feeder. I cannot give you exactly the timeline because I will not be directly responsible for that downgrading. But I assure you that there is a consistent process of reviewing the service level and the energy delivered, and those feeders will be downgraded to a Band-B feeder until the energy supply meets the Band-A requirements.
Now, the minister has pledged full recovery within 14 days. How realistic is this timeline? Considering the fact that he has been at the saddle for about 3 years, how realistic is this 14 days?
Well, I think you shouldn't look at it from that perspective because this specific issue is quite specific to this moment. I would say 3, 4, 5 months ago, you were in a situation where I even heard people saying, on Band-A, I have too much electricity, this is just too much. So again, I think we should be, I understand the emotion of electricity, but one thing that we have to realize is that we still have some time to go to build a resilient and robust electricity value chain, right? And we always have to recognize that as Nigerians. The issues that we're facing today are not the issues that started in 2023. There are significant historical issues that need to be fixed over time. And I truly believe that we're moving in the right trajectory, and all these issues that occur along the line would actually help us to be more robust. So for example, I'll give you, do we have enough gas transportation in Nigeria to be able to supply, the domestic obligation for gas? The answer is no. How are we going to build more gas transportation in Nigeria if gas companies or the gas transportation company feels that they're not charging a cost-reflective price? If they charge a cost-reflective price, have we calculated that price into the downstream price for electricity? So there are many factors that feed into this value chain that sometimes when I get feedback is very simplistic. And I don't expect everybody to understand every intricacy. But one of the things that I want to assure is that the federal government is trying to do things in the right way to ensure that sustainability is at the heart of the sector. Once sustainability is at the heart of the sector, then the right investments will come through to ensure that we have a robust system. So to your question about how do we ensure that in the next 2 weeks, of course, the responsibility of fixing the gas pipeline is not ours. But one of the things that we're working very closely with the Ministry of Petroleum Gas to continue to follow up on how the maintenance is going on that particular pipeline. And from our understanding, a 2-week window has been given to finalize, and we will continue to check that timeline to ensure that we can meet it. And if there are any challenges in meeting that 2-week timeline, then we'll be able to share again with the public to at least give them a clearer perspective. But I am sure that we're going to gradually see improvement in gas pressure to ensure that generation companies are able to now generate at their maximum capacity or at the capacity they were generating before these specific issues arise.
Okay, you talked about the fact that about 75% of our power generation plants are thermal-based, gas-fired power plants. Correct. What is government doing to explore other sources of power generation? A country like South Africa, for example, relies on coal. Brazil relies on hydro. What are we doing to ensure that we are not overly reliant on these gas-fired power plants?
Power plants. No, thank you very much for that question. So 75% of our generation is thermal, but about 25% of our generation is hydro. But of course, that would not be enough during this challenging time to meet the sort of the deviation or the gap that we're seeing. Of course, the idea is to drive more generation potentially through renewables, but also to embed, for example, more intermittent energy like solar, utility scale solar, wind energy. We also have to build more robust and resilient infrastructure on the grid. You know, and that's where I think we haven't been able to bring in utility scale solar to the grid. But it's coming now that we're finalizing SCADA, where we'll be able to monitor generating plants, you'll be able to monitor the substations. So then it's easy to be able to balance the intermittency of the energy that comes from solar. So I expect in the next couple of years, we will start to see some utility scale solar coming up. There are already some sort of tenders going on for small utility scale solar, and we'll continue to see that. One of the things that to achieve the least cost energy is to make sure that we have, competitive tendering processes for additional generation that is going to come through onto the grid. Once you have this, it's not just about building new generation capacity, but it's about building new generation capacity at the lowest cost, because eventually that is going to feed into your downstream tariff. So I believe that there's a lot of work going on bringing in additional generation, potentially renewables, but we need to continue to do more. We need to make the market also more sustainable so that generation companies feel comfortable that if they build a new power plant, they are going to get paid for the power they generate and the supply to the distribution segment. But I'm sure that there's additional generation coming through that will be renewable very soon.
Yeah, I want to ask you this question now that you are here, because people ask me all the time, because I once went to Mambila to do a documentary about the Mambila power plant. People keep asking me, what is happening to the Mambila power project, which is capable of giving us 3,500 megawatts even in dry season. What can you tell us about Mambila at this time?
Well, unfortunately, I don't want to comment too much on Mambila because there's still litigation around Mambila. And to be honest, it's unfortunate, but that's the reality for almost, I think, 10 years, right? That there's been different types of litigation around Mambila, and that's why that hydro dam has not been developed. But nevertheless, we have multiple opportunities to develop further hydro in Nigeria. The federal government at the moment, with the World Bank, is driving a program called SPIN, which is sort of going to develop a hydro master plan for Nigeria. Nigeria has about 14,000 megawatts of hydro capacity, and out of which we are only using about 2,000 megawatts. So we have so much natural resources to develop further hydro. Of course, hydro takes a long time to develop, probably 6 to 8 years. But I believe that with that hydro master plan, the federal government will be able to look at some of those hydro locations outside of Mambila and commit to driving that. I mean, we just delivered Zugeru power plant, I believe, last year or a year and a half ago, which is delivering about 700 megawatts capacity, but about 400 megawatts to the grid. For us in Nigeria, hydro is still the cheapest form of generation. And of course, with this hydro master plan being developed, there will be a lot of focus from federal government to look at how we can develop more hydro as a mix of our total generation, reducing the percentage of gas generation that is going onto the grid, and also trying to bring down the cost of generation, so eventually we also have a more sustainable tariff across the value chain.
Yeah. Can we realistically expect stable electricity without fixing the liquidity crisis in the sector? That's number one. Number two, looking at the big picture, is Nigeria's power problem fundamentally a technical challenge, a financial crisis, or a failure of governance? So I would be to achieve any sustainable value chain without liquidity is impossible. And this is why you must give credit to the Honorable Minister of Power as one of the first ministers that really understood and accepted the fact that a commercially viable electricity sector is very, very critical to moving forward. And that's the bane of a lot of the issues today. I can assure you, and let me give you an example. For example, a gas supplier, you want to develop more gas fields. You have to pay upfront for that as a gas supplier. You want to process gas. You have to pay upfront to build processing plants. Now, you then have a power sector that is currently paying only 35 to 40% of its bills. It's very, very difficult to have a commercial discussion or decision made on that basis. And that's why we constantly have the challenge of investment in this sector. And that's why our belief is that the first thing to do is to ensure that this sector is commercially viable. We try to move away from open-ended subsidy, and we focus on a targeted subsidy to those who are economically challenged. And I assure you that in the short term, everybody will feel the pain of potentially more expensive electricity. But in the medium to long term, what you start to get is more efficiency in the system. Because a system that is filled with subsidy is also inefficient in delivering energy. And when that subsidy is not being paid, you are now matching inefficiency in delivering energy to inefficiency on the commercial side. And that's why we face these issues consistently. Okay. But when you look at markets that are paying commercial pricing for electricity, if the service provider is not providing that electricity, there are 101 companies that want to come in where there's a cost-reflective tariff to deliver that service. So it becomes more competitive. And eventually your price starts to go down. And that's what you see in economies that have competitive bidding processes for energy. And that's why I personally hope that we'll move further towards commercial value chain to be able to drive this.
Thank you so much. We've been speaking with the Chief Technical Advisor to the Minister of Power, Adedayo Olowoniyi. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
All right. You talk about band A. I'm on the band B side. I don't know what to say now. But do you think he actually hit all the right notes?
Yes, I think so. I think so. I think so. And he was honest.
He was honest in his answers. And the apology was, what do you think?
Yeah, I think some of us who are in Band A, we need to write the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission.
Maybe copy NERC as well.
Yes, and make a protest to NERC so that, because it's like the NERC is a toothless bulldog. so that, because
there's no reason for people to pay for services.
And they won't get it.
There's absolutely no reason for that.
It's irresponsible.
Absolutely.
And we still have another 14 days to go. Yeah, refund. Now they ought to
all right, but gentlemen, let's count somewhere. So
yeah, drumming those bucks are really long.
All right, Majid Jami, thank you so much for having this conversation. The Maestro, thank you so much for having this with us. And that's it on Journalist Hangout today. Join us tomorrow for another episode of the program. You can watch the repeat broadcast of this episode tonight at 11. Join us on Sunday from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. for Journalist Hangout on Sunday. We are on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Benga Oreshegun. Bye for now, and God bless Nigeria.